The problem with bureaucratically sanctioned torture is the paperwork, not the moral quandaries. Those had been settled through 17 subcommittee meetings and one particularly contentious lunch break. No, it was the sheer volume of documentation required when systematically dismantling a sentient being for science. Temperature has increased by 1.3 degrees, announced Chief Researcher Vox-Nem, their sensory appendages fluttering with the excitement of fresh data. Record that the specimen maintains homeostasis, despite significant blood loss. Around a horseshoe-shaped observation platform, representatives from 6 major galactic powers watched the proceedings with varying degrees of interest. The Miktani delegate was practically vibrating with anticipation, while the Zorlax ambassador had fallen asleep, though with 17 independent brainstems, partial consciousness was considered full attendance. Below them, strapped to a medical slab that hummed with restraint fields, lay the human. Female, approximately 30 Earth cycles old, with the curious copper-tinted head filaments that some humans cultivated. Designation: Specimen H42. Begin Phase 7, ordered Director Luth, the highest-ranking official present and, consequently, the least scientifically qualified. Vox-Nem signaled to a hovering medical drone, which extended a precision tool toward the human's exposed neural tissue. Cerebral stimulation commencing. This should trigger what humans call pain receptors, without causing immediate biological shutdown. The human's body arched against the restraints. A sound escaped her lips. Not the expected scream, but something worse. Laughter. "Is the translation matrix functioning?" demanded Luth, mandibles clicking with irritation. "Perfectly," confirmed the technology specialist, a spindly Rax whose specialized appendages danced across holographic displays. "The specimen is exhibiting behavior consistent with psychological defense mechanisms. Fascinating." The human's eyes, unavailingly forward-facing, like all apex predators, locked onto Luth's central vision cluster. "You know what's funny?" she rasped, voice raw from previous screaming. "On Earth, we have stories about this. Abduction, experimentation, probing." Another burst of that disturbing laughter. "We were right all along." Specimen demonstrates continued linguistic coherence despite significant trauma, noted Vox-Nem, recording diligently. "Unexpected." The Miktani delegate leaned forward on their gravity chair. "Ask it about the rumors, about human resilience." Director Luth made a dismissive gesture with his ceremonial appendage. "Myths and exaggerations. Their planet's historical records are filled with supernatural fantasies, resurrection, reincarnation, immortal souls. Yet they've survived 3 extinction-level events on their homeworld," countered the Miktani, "and their expansion rate exceeds predicted models by 47%. Below, the human's vitals were deteriorating rapidly. The medical drone hovered uncertainly, awaiting instructions. "Continue," ordered Luth. "We need complete data on terminal responses." The human's laugh turned into a wet cough. Blood, alarmingly red against the sterile white of the medical chamber, spattered from her mouth. "You're making a terrible mistake." "The specimen attempts intimidation," noted Vox-Nem. "Psychological projection common in prey species facing inevitable demise." "Not intimidation," whispered the human, voice fading. "Warning, we always come back." The Zorlax ambassador suddenly jerked awake, all 17 brainstems apparently synchronized for once. "It speaks of the re-spawn myth. Their entertainment simulations feature this concept extensively." Director Luth's patience was wearing thin. Their primitive digital entertainments are not scientific evidence. This is precisely why the Galactic Research Consortium authorized this specimen's acquisition, to separate fact from fiction. Heart rate dropping precipitously, announced a medical drone. Brain activity shows pre-terminal patterns. The human's eyes remained fixed on Luth, even as her body began shutting down. 37 minutes, she whispered. That's my record. See you soon. Then she died. The observation room erupted in a flurry of activity. Data collectors scrambled to preserve neural patterns that were rapidly dissolving. Tissue samples were extracted with mechanical precision. The Miktani delegate was practically hovering above their gravity chair with excitement, while Director Luth maintained a pose of scientific detachment that fooled absolutely no one. Time of biological cessation. Central Galactic Time, 34:42:76, recorded Vox Nem. Remarkably stubborn specimen. Most humans expire after Phase 4. Schedule the molecular dissolution for immediate processing, ordered Luth. I want comprehensive analysis of every cell before the quantum decay begins. Shouldn't we wait, suggested the Zorlak's ambassador, 14 of its brain stems apparently in rare agreement. The specimen mentioned 37 minutes. A ripple of amusement passed through the observation room, a different gesture from each species, but universally condescending. Ambassador, said Luth, with the patience reserved for beings with more political power than sense. Humans have believed in resurrection for their entire recorded history. They've built religious empires on the concept. They've fought wars over different interpretations of afterlife mechanics. Not once has there been documented evidence of a human returning from biological death. Their entertainment specifically features a respawn mechanism, persisted the Zorlaks. Fiction, dismissed Vox Nem. Their species uses elaborate fantasy to process their terror of permanent cessation, quite common among sentients with limited lifespans. Below, medical drones were already preparing the human's remains for molecular dissolution. The specimen's blood was being meticulously collected for analysis, her tissue catalogued by type and function. Her eyes, still unsettlingly open, were photographed for the xenobiology archives. Transport the remains to Dissolution Chamber 3, ordered Director Luth. This session has provided excellent baseline data on human physiological limits. Schedule the next specimen for tomorrow's cycle. As the observation room emptied of officials, only Vox Nem remained, finalizing the experimental documentation. Something about the human's last words nagged at their scientific curiosity. 37 minutes. So specific, yet so meaningless. Why would a dying creature use its final breath for such a precise falsehood? Vox Nem dismissed the thought. The mysteries of human psychology were interesting, but ultimately explicable through evolutionary biology. They were resilient for a carbon-based species, certainly, but nothing that defied the universal constants of science. The dissolution chamber hummed to life, beginning the process of breaking down the human remains, molecule by molecule. In 36 minutes, there would be nothing left of specimen H42 except comprehensive data files and tissue samples. Vox Nem checked the time and began preparing for the next experiment. The Committee for Human Research had 14 more specimens in stasis, ready to yield their biological secrets. Everything was proceeding exactly as planned. 34 minutes after official death certification, Dissolution Chamber 3 registered an anomaly. Probably another power fluctuation, muttered the technician monitoring the system, a junior Rax whose career aspirations extended precisely as far as not being noticed by superiors. The technician, who preferred the designation 5 breaks among colleagues due to an unprecedented talent for extending mandatory rest periods, tapped listlessly at the console. The anomaly persisted. Vibrates sighed with all 4 respiratory channels and actually looked at the readout. Then froze. Energy signatures inside the chamber were increasing, not decreasing. The chamber was designed to break down matter into constituent molecules, a process that, by definition, consumed energy. It didn't generate it. Control room, 5 breaks commend hesitantly. We have unusual readings from DC3. Log it and proceed with standard recalibration, replied an equally bored voice. That's just it. I've run diagnostics twice. Equipment shows optimal functioning. A pause. What kind of anomaly? Energy production. From within the chamber. Another pause. Longer this time. Impossible. Matter doesn't spontaneously generate energy during dissolution. Tell that to the human remains. 5 breaks muttered, forgetting the comm was still active. The what? 5 breaks winced. Specimen H42. From today's research session. The comm went silent for exactly 6 seconds before exploding with the voice of Chief Researcher Vox Nem. Lock down that chamber, full containment protocols. Alert Director Luth and summon the research team immediately. Across the research station, alarms began blaring. Security personnel scrambled toward Dissolution Chamber 3, while researchers frantically pulled up data streams. Within moments, a crowd had formed outside the chamber's observation window. "Show me the internal feed," demanded Vox Nem, pushing through the gathering crowd. The display activated, revealing the interior of the chamber. What they saw defied explanation. Specimen H42's remains weren't dissolving. They were reconstructing. Muscle fibers crawled across reforming bone, organs reassembled from molecular components that should have been completely separated by now. Most disturbing was the brain. Neural pathways visibly reconnecting in impossible, precise patterns. "This violates at least 7 fundamental laws of physics," whispered a Zorlax researcher, all 17 brainstems apparently stunned into simultaneous activity. Director Luth arrived, shoving junior staff aside. "What's happening? Why isn't the chamber functioning?" "It is functioning," replied Vox Nem, transfixed by the display. "Something else is functioning against it." The Miktani delegate hovered nearby, multifaceted eyes gleaming with vindication. "The respawn, exactly as the human predicted." "Absurd," snapped Luth. "There must be a scientific explanation, perhaps a previously unknown cellular regeneration mechanism." "Cells don't regenerate after molecular dissolution," interrupted a medical specialist. "It's not just unlikely, it's fundamentally impossible." Yet the impossible continued unfolding before them. Skin flowed like liquid across the reconstructing body, sealing wounds and covering exposed tissue. Hair regrew in precisely the same pattern documented during initial examination. And most unsettling of all, the neural activity indicators showed patterns consistent with consciousness. 37 minutes, murmured Vox Nem. That's what she said. Her record. The observation room fell silent as the implications sank in. This wasn't unprecedented. It was simply unprecedented to them. To the human, it was expected. Routine, even. "Increase dissolution intensity," ordered Luth, mandibles clicking rapidly in distress. "Maximum power." "Inadvisable," countered the chamber technician. "The energy feedback could destabilize the entire system." "We cannot allow this phenomenon to continue," insisted Luth. "The implications are fascinating," interrupted the Miktani delegate. "We may be witnessing the scientific basis for what humans call resurrection." The readouts spiked suddenly. Heart activity, brain function, complete nervous system integration. The human's eyes opened, and she smiled. A collective gasp rippled through the observation room as specimen H42 sat up, apparently unconcerned by her naked state, or the molecular dissolution field still actively attempting to break down her newly reformed body. 35 minutes, she announced, examining a non-existent timepiece on her wrist. New personal best. Must be the adrenaline from the torture. Really gets the reconstruction juices flowing. Every recording device in the facility was now trained on the chamber. Representatives from 6 species watched in stunned silence as the human stretched casually, like someone waking from a nap rather than molecular death. "Full quarantine," barked Luth finally. "Nothing leaves that chamber." The human cocked her head, looking directly at the observation window as if she could see through its one-way transparency. "About that," she said conversationally. "Here's what you misunderstood about humans. Death isn't the end for us. It's just a really unpleasant checkpoint." She stood and approached the chamber wall. The dissolution field crackled around her, visibly attempting to break down her molecular structure, yet having no apparent effect. "Fascinating defense mechanism," observed the Zorlak's ambassador, who had arrived breathless from their quarters. "But how does it work?" "Increase security," ordered Luth, ignoring the question. "That chamber was designed to contain corrosive gas. It cannot hold a fully mobile sentient." "It was designed to dissolve corpses," corrected Voxnen. "No one considered the possibility of said corpses objecting to the process." The human placed her palm against the chamber wall. The material, supposedly impervious to everything short of stellar collapse, began to ripple, like disturbed water. "That's thermodynamically impossible," whispered a physicist. "Physics," replied the human, voice carrying clearly through the chamber's communication system, "is more of a suggestion to us than a rule. You really should have studied our mythology more carefully." The wall beneath her palm began to glow red-hot. "Evacuate all non-essential personnel," ordered Luth, backing toward the exit himself. "Security teams to Containment Sector 3. Most of the observers fled, but Voxnem remained transfixed. "How?" they asked simply. "How are you doing this?" The human paused her apparent molecular manipulation of supposedly indestructible materials. "Evolution," she replied, as if explaining something to a particularly slow child. "On Earth, everything tries to kill you. Predators, weather, geography, microorganisms, other humans. Death was common, frequent, almost guaranteed. So we adapted." "Species don't evolve resurrection," insisted Voxnem. "Yours didn't," corrected the human. "Ours did. Not all of us, not right away, but enough. The ones who could come back passed on those genes. The ones who stayed dead didn't." The wall under her palm suddenly gave way, melting into a perfect arch-shaped opening. Alarms screamed throughout the facility as containment protocols registered the breach. Security personnel flooded into the observation room, weapons trained on the dissolving wall. The human stepped calmly through the opening, seemingly untroubled by either her nakedness or the dozen weapons targeting her vital organs. "I remember everything, you know," she said conversationally. "Every cut, every probe, every smug observation about primitive human physiology." Director Luth had retreated to the far side of the room, flanked by his personal security detail. "Specimen H42. "My designation," interrupted the human, "is Combat Engineer Trace, and you've just given me extremely valuable data on your research capabilities, weapons technology, and facility layout." She glanced around at the various recording devices, still actively documenting the impossible event. "Oh good, you're recording. That will save time later." Security forces opened fire, stun weapons designed to incapacitate without killing. The energy bursts hit the human squarely in the chest and disappeared into her skin like water into sand. "It tickles," she remarked, continuing her casual advance. "Probably because you calibrated those weapons for a standard human nervous system. But I'm not exactly standard anymore, am I? Death has a way of upgrading the hardware." The observation room descended into chaos as security personnel retreated and researchers scrambled to collect data on the phenomenon unfolding before them. Only Vox Nem remained in place, scientific curiosity apparently outweighing self-preservation. "What happens now?" they asked quietly. Combat Engineer Trace smiled, not the desperate grin of a torture victim, but the confident smile of someone who had just dramatically reversed the power dynamic. "Now," she said, "we negotiate the terms of your surrender." The station's emergency council convened in what was optimistically called the diplomatic sector, essentially a glorified cafeteria hastily repurposed with dignitary seating. 6 species represented, 12 translators, and 1 naked human standing calmly at the center of a 3-layered security perimeter that everyone present knew was purely theatrical. Combat Engineer Trace examined the assembled alien leadership with the casual interest of someone browsing exotic pets. "No chairs my size? Speciesist?" "This is not a diplomatic meeting," snapped Director Luth, wisely positioned behind 3 of his largest security officers. "This is a containment scenario." "Containment?" Trace laughed. "I died earlier today. Your concept of containment seems flexible." The Miktani delegate hovered forward on their gravity chair. "We wish to understand. Your abilities defy conventional science." "No," corrected Trace. "They defy your conventional science." Vox Nem had been furiously analyzing data from the resurrection event, multiple appendages manipulating holographic displays. "The energy signatures during your reconstitution showed quantum patterns consistent with theoretical dimension folding." "Fancy words for a simple concept," Trace replied. "We call it coming back." "From where?" asked the Zorlak's ambassador, now fully awake across all brainstems. "What exists between death and return?" Trace's expression shifted, the first hint of something beyond sarcastic confidence. "Nothing worth remembering. A waiting room with terrible magazines." The assembled researchers began speaking over each other, questions flying from every direction. Trace held up a hand, and to everyone's surprise, the room fell silent. "Let me save you some time," she said. "Yes, all humans can do this. No, we don't advertise it. Yes, it hurts every single time. No, we cannot teach you. Yes, there are limits. No, I won't tell you what they are." Director Luth's mandibles clicked in obvious frustration. "You expect us to believe your entire species possesses this ability, yet it remains undocumented in any scientific literature?" "We documented it plenty," Trace replied. "You just filed it under primitive religious mythology. Pretty much every human culture has stories about resurrection, reincarnation, afterlives, souls leaving bodies and returning. We've been trying to explain it to ourselves for millennia." "Fairy tales," dismissed Luth. "Says the giant insectoid dismissing evidence literally standing in front of him," Trace countered. "Your arrogance is remarkable. You categorized humanity as a Type C developing civilization, correct? Limited to our solar system, minimal quantum manipulation capability, culturally fragmented." The sudden display of cosmic political awareness created an uncomfortable silence. "How do you know galactic classification protocols?" demanded a security officer. Trace tapped her temple. "Death has side effects. Sometimes you come back with more than you left with. Memories that aren't yours, knowledge you never learned." The Miktani delegates' hovering intensified. their species equivalent of excited fidgeting. You're describing consciousness transfer, the holy grail of neural science. We just call it weird shit that happens, Trace shrugged. Like I said, our mythology tried to explain it. Ancient Egyptians believed in the weighing of souls. Norse traditions spoke of Valhalla and warriors returning to battle. Christianity centered around a resurrection story. Wasn't until we understood quantum genetics that we recognized what was actually happening. Voxnem's appendages trembled with scientific excitement. Your DNA contains quantum indexing properties. Bingo! Trace pointed finger guns at the researcher. Turns out consciousness isn't just electrical signals in meat, it has a quantum address. Every human mind exists in two states simultaneously, the physical brain and the quantum template. When the physical form dies, the quantum template rebuilds it, whispered Voxnem, using ambient energy and matter. Which explains why resurrection consumes so much energy, added the Miktani delegate. The thermodynamic requirements would be enormous. Trace nodded. Hence why I'm starving. Any chance of getting clothes and food before continuing this fascinating discussion of my biology? The request created a flurry of activity as staff scrambled to accommodate. Minutes later, dressed in an ill-fitting environmental suit and demolishing a tray of ration cubes with alarming efficiency, Trace continued. You've been studying humans for the wrong reasons, she said between bites. Your Galactic consortium sees us as potential threats because we expand quickly and adapt to hostile environments. You think it's because we're unusually aggressive or fertile. The truth is much simpler. Death doesn't stick to us. Colonizing deadly worlds is easier when settlers can try again after fatal mistakes. Director Luth had been uncharacteristically quiet, his compound eyes fixed on the human. If what you say is true, why has humanity not dominated your planet? Why maintain the charade of being mortal? Tracy's expression darkened. Because it's not universal. And it's not unlimited. Some humans can't come back at all. Some can only come back once. Some, like me, have specific limits. And coming back wrong is worse than staying dead. Wrong? Asked Voxnem. Damaged. Corrupted. Trace gestured vaguely. Think software errors, but for consciousness. Sometimes the template degrades or gets scrambled during transfer. That's where zombie myths come from. The revelation created another wave of murmurs among the assembled aliens. But the strategic advantage, began Luth, is precisely why we've kept it quiet, interrupted Trace. Imagine if everyone knew some humans could respawn indefinitely. We'd never know peace. We'd be harvested as weapons, studied endlessly, feared universally. She fixed Luth with a pointed stare. Sort of like what you were doing. The accusation hung in the air like a blade. That's why you're here, realized Voxnem. Your military sent you deliberately. You allowed yourself to be captured. Trace's smile was neither confirmation nor denial. I'm just a combat engineer who died and came back. Draw your own conclusions. A junior officer burst into the chamber, rushing to Luth's side. Urgent whispers were exchanged before the director's posture shifted dramatically, from scientific authority to something approaching alarm. Our long-range sensors have detected a human vessel approaching this station, Luth announced. They're demanding your immediate release. Already? Chase checked her non-existent watch again. They're ahead of schedule. Must have been monitoring my vital signs. You have implanted technology, demanded the security chief. No need. Trace tapped her temple again. Quantum entanglement. My consciousness maintains connections with specialized receivers. When I died, an alert was automatically triggered. Standard procedure for operatives with resurrection capability. The implications rippled through the room. Humans not only could return from death, but they had weaponized the ability, built protocols around it, integrated it into military strategy. "Your species is more advanced than our intelligence suggested," admitted the Mitanni delegate. "Or perhaps," suggested Trace, "your intelligence was exactly what we wanted you to have." Director Luth's professional composure finally cracked. "This facility contains sensitive research. We cannot allow human military forces to—" "Relax," interrupted Trace. "They're not here to attack you. They're my ride home." She popped the last ration cube into her mouth. "Though I should mention that my mission parameters included collecting intelligence on this facility if the opportunity arose. Which, thanks to your hospitality, it did." She stood, stretching casually. "So, here's what happens next. I walk out of here and board my extraction vessel. You pretend you never discovered humanity's little biological quirk. We pretend we didn't map your entire research network while I was dead." "And if we refuse?" challenged Luth. Trace's casual demeanor vanished, replaced by something ancient and cold. "Then I die again, and come back again, and again. Each time learning more about your defenses, each time becoming harder to kill. I'll tear this station apart molecule by molecule, until nothing remains but floating debris. And then I'll respawn among the wreckage and wait for my pickup." The threat landed with chilling effect, precisely because no one in the room doubted her capability. "That won't be necessary," said Voxnem quickly. "Director Luth speaks out of scientific curiosity, not hostility. We would be pleased to facilitate your departure." Trace's friendly demeanor returned instantly. "Excellent. I knew we could be reasonable. Just one more thing before I go, a gesture of goodwill." She reached into a pocket of her borrowed environmental suit and withdrew what appeared to be a small data crystal. "What's this?" asked Voxnem. "The answer to the question you're all too afraid to ask," replied Trace. "Whether your species can develop resurrection capability. Short answer, yes, with the right genetic modifications. This data contains theoretical frameworks, nothing weaponizable, just enough to point your researchers in the right direction." Director Luth stared at the crystal with naked longing that transcended species barriers. "Why would you share this?" Trace shrugged. "Because death is a terrible design flaw in an otherwise interesting universe. And because enemies who can't permanently kill each other tend to find diplomatic solutions more appealing." She glanced around the room one final time. "Now, if you'll escort me to the docking bay, I believe my colleagues are waiting, and they're probably very curious about what exactly happened during my 37 minutes of death." The human vessel that docked with Research Station Epsilon 9 defied expectations in every possible way. For one, it was small, barely larger than a standard escape pod. For another, it contained exactly one occupant. And finally, it was unarmed. At least it appeared unarmed to conventional scanning technology. "Your extraction team is compact," observed Voxnem, escorting combat engineer Trace through the docking bay alongside a thoroughly unnecessary security detail. "Bold of you to assume this is the entire team," Trace replied, eyes twinkling with mischief, "or that extraction was the only mission parameter." The docking bay doors slid open to reveal the human craft, an elegant teardrop of matte black material that seemed to drink in light rather than reflect it. Standing beside it was another human, male, with skin several shades darker than Trace's and a completely hairless head. He wore what appeared to be standard-issue military attire, lacking any identifying insignia. "You're late," he called out to Trace. "Died," she replied with a casual shrug. "Paperwork was a nightmare." The male human's expression remained professionally neutral, but the corners of his mouth twitched almost imperceptibly. acceptable delay, secure, compromised, reformed and upgraded, she responded, completing what was obviously a coded status report. Director Luth, hovering at the rear of the procession, leaned toward a security officer. Specialized military terminology, he muttered. Record everything. The male human's gaze shifted to Luth, despite the considerable distance and low volume of the exchange. Your recording devices have been experiencing selective malfunctions for the past 17 minutes, he stated flatly. Curious technical issue. Luth's mandibles clicked with indignation. This station operates under Galactic Consortium protection protocols. Any tampering with would be completely impossible given humanity's primitive technological capabilities, completed the male human. We're well aware of our official assessment. He paused. Incidentally, you might want to update that assessment, preferably before your next abduction operation. The diplomatic temperature in the bay dropped several degrees. Look at you, making friends, Trace interjected, stepping forward to join her colleague. This is why they don't send you to the dinner parties. Effectiveness over etiquette, he responded simply. Trace turned back to face the assembled alien representatives. This has been educational for everyone involved. You learned that humans have biological party tricks you didn't account for. We learned that your research division needs better ethical oversight committees and enhanced security protocols, added her colleague. And that, agreed Trace. But before we depart, there's one final piece of business. She focused her attention on Vox Nem. You've been collecting data this entire time, haven't you? The chief researcher's appendages twitched nervously. Scientific observation is my primary function. Thought so, Trace smiled. Good. I want you to disseminate that data, all of it, throughout your research network. Director Luth stepped forward. Absolutely not. The security implications are precisely the point, interrupted Trace. Your consortium has been monitoring Earth for generations, cataloging us as a curiosity, aggressive primitives with inexplicable expansion patterns. You've been operating under a dangerous misapprehension that we're just stubborn animals who haven't yet learned our place in the galactic hierarchy. Her colleague nodded. An extinction-level miscalculation. What my cheerful associate means, Trace continued, is that transparency benefits everyone. When your network understands what humans are capable of, they'll approach future interactions with appropriate consideration. The Miktani delegate floated forward. You wish to establish deterrence through fear? Through facts, corrected Trace. Fear is for species that can die permanently. Her statement hung in the air, its implications rippling outward like a stone dropped in still water. Not a threat, but a fundamental reclassification of humanity's place in the cosmic order. The data crystal I provided contains more than theoretical frameworks, she added. It contains proof that resurrection capability exists across numerous species. It's just that most haven't evolved the trait naturally, as we did. Your scientists will confirm this within days. The revelation sent visible shock through the assembled aliens. Immortality is achievable for all sentient species, continued Trace. This changes everything: resource competition, territorial expansion, even the concept of war itself. When death becomes temporary, power dynamics shift fundamentally. Which brings us to our proposal, her colleague interjected. Humanity offers technological exchange. We provide resurrection science, you provide faster-than-light travel advancements. Director Luth's compound eyes widened. You're offering to share the secret of immortality for transportation technology? Seems like an unbalanced trade, doesn't it? Trace smiled. Almost as if we value different things. You've spent millennia searching for ways to extend life. We've spent that time figuring out what to do with the lives we keep getting back. Voxnem stepped forward, appendages trembling with excitement. The philosophical implications alone are staggering. If consciousness can transfer between deaths, then what else might consciousness do? Completed Trace. Exactly the right question, and one we're eager to explore together rather than as adversaries. The male human checked a device on his wrist. Departure window closing. Trace nodded. Right, decision time, folks. Official first contact, technological exchange and mutual advancement, or continued abduction, experimentation, and escalating consequences when you kidnap humans who can return with increasingly unpleasant abilities. The Zorlak's ambassador, silent until now, suddenly activated all 17 brainstems in synchronous speech, a rare event typically reserved for moments of profound revelation. The human afterlife myths. They weren't describing what happens after death, they were describing what happens between deaths. Give that ambassador a prize, grinned Trace. Your religions seek to explain what happens after your final death. Ours developed to explain what happens during the brief intermission between performances. Director Luth's professional composure reasserted itself with visible effort. The consortium will require time to consider such a dramatic proposal. Of course, Trace nodded reasonably. Take all the time you need. Just be aware that every human who dies from this point forward might return with interesting new perspectives on your research network. Her colleague almost smiled. Knowledge transfers during resurrection are unpredictable, but comprehensive. The implication landed with precision. Every human death potentially created a new security breach. The consortium couldn't afford not to negotiate. My belief, said Voxnem carefully, that an immediate preliminary agreement would be prudent, pending formal ratification, of course. Of course, echoed Trace. Bureaucracy transcends species barriers, apparently. The docking bay transformed into an impromptu negotiation chamber as data pads were produced and preliminary terms established. Throughout the process, Trace maintained her casual demeanor, as if the complete restructuring of galactic politics were an everyday occurrence. When the initial agreement was finalized, she and her colleague prepared to board their vessel. "To last thing," Trace said, pausing at the craft's entrance. "A word of advice for future xenobiologists studying unusual species. Don't torture them to death," suggested her colleague dryly. "Well, yes, that, but also," Trace's expression turned philosophical. "When a species tells you stories about coming back from death, returning from the underworld, or souls reuniting with bodies, maybe take notes instead of dismissing them as primitive superstition." She glanced meaningfully at the still visible scars on her arms, remnants of the morning's scientific research that even resurrection hadn't completely erased. "Mythology isn't what happens when science fails," she concluded. "It's what happens when science hasn't caught up yet." The human vassal departed without fanfare, leaving behind a research station in philosophical crisis and a data crystal that would rewrite the fundamental understanding of life and death throughout the galaxy. In the observation lounge, Voxnem watched the ship disappear into the darkness, a question forming in their mind that no amount of scientific inquiry could answer. If humans had evolved resurrection naturally over thousands of years on their violent homeworld, what other evolutionary adaptations might they be hiding? The universe had operated under a simple rule since the beginning of time. Everything that lives must eventually die. But now there was an asterisk to that rule, a footnote that read, "Except humans. They have a workaround." And asterisks, as any scientist knows, have a way of expanding until they become the rule themselves. Meanwhile, aboard the departing vessel, combat engineer Trace settled into a recovery pod. finally allowing the strain of multiple deaths and resurrections to show on her face. "Was it worth it?" asked her colleague, initiating the ship's FTL systems. Trace closed her eyes, remembering the forced experimental procedures, the pain, the death, and then the looks on alien faces when she returned. "Dying always hurts," she replied quietly, "but watching someone realize they've fundamentally misunderstood the universe, that part never gets old." The ship vanished into faster-than-light travel, carrying home a secret that had never actually been secret at all, just written in humanity's oldest stories, waiting for someone to take them literally.